They were stars, icons, household names, but if the world had known who they really loved, their careers would have been over. In 1970s Hollywood, being a lesbian or bisexual woman wasn't just taboo, it was dangerous. These 20 actresses were forced to hide their truth to survive. Now we're telling the stories they couldn't. "I'm as pure as the driven slush," she once quipped. Tallulah wasn't closeted so much as uncensored. A Broadway icon and Hollywood rarity, she openly flirted with women, declared her bisexuality with a wink, and scandalized her contemporaries. Though she passed away just before the 1970s began, her spirit hovered over the decade like a mischievous ghost. She was proof that queerness existed even when it had no name, and that some women lived loud, despite the cost. She ruled with eyebrows arched and secrets buried. Crawford was all Hollywood, elegance, control, and image. Biographers have uncovered clues of romantic encounters with women, especially in her early studio years, but no such relationships were ever publicly acknowledged. In private, she may have known great love, or at least great longing, but in public, she was Joan Crawford, the brand, the warrior, the survivor. Her face was flawless, her truth hidden in shadows. A powerful singer, Broadway presence, and keeper of secrets. Though never as widely known as some of her peers, Dolores Hall's presence in the theater community of the 1970s was felt deeply. As a Black lesbian in a closeted era, she navigated not only Hollywood's homophobia, but its racism as well. Friends and fellow performers acknowledged her long-term relationships with women, but Hall herself never publicly discussed her identity. A silence rooted in the times she endured. She played Endora with fire. Off-screen, she lit few sparks the public could see. Moorhead, best known as the sarcastic spell-casting mother on Bewitched, was one of the most respected character actresses of her time. Yet she was also part of Hollywood's infamous Lavender Circle, a group of powerful women thought to be lesbians or bisexuals. She married once, briefly. After that, her life was one of emotional discretion. Even in death, she left behind no clear testimony. She chose privacy over vulnerability and remained a ghost of possibility in Hollywood's collective queer memory. Say it, type it, share it. You never know who else might need to hear your words. She kissed men for the camera and women in the wings. Dietrich was a rule breaker before it was trendy. Dressed in tuxedos, seducing both genders, she exuded bisexual confidence in an era that barely had language for it. Her affairs with Edith Piaf, Mercedes de Acosta, and other women were whispered among insiders, but never confirmed by her. By the 1970s, she lived in near-total seclusion in Paris, still writing letters to old lovers, including women who had shaped her private passions. In her twilight years, she was both timeless and hidden, a mirror of what it meant to be queer and famous before pride was possible. A director before her time, and a woman who dared to love another woman. Arzner directed dozens of major films in the 1930s and 40s, at a time when women barely got a foot in the door. She lived for decades with choreographer Marion Morgan, a partnership as domestic as any marriage, though never named as such publicly. By the 70s, she had long since retired, living quietly in Los Angeles. The world remembered her for her career, but her quiet revolution lived on in every woman who later directed or dared to live outside the norm. She made people laugh, but lived with secrets. The elegant French-American star never came out, but spent much of her later life in the Caribbean with a female companion. The media referred to her as a recluse, ignoring the intimacy of her chosen family. In her absence from Hollywood, Colbert found peace. She didn't seek applause in her old age, only authenticity, in whatever form she could manage behind closed doors. She wasn't like anyone else, and never tried to be. With her ethereal voice and off-kilter charm, Dennis won an Oscar and the hearts of outsiders everywhere. She never publicly discussed her sexuality, but many close to her believed she was queer. In Connecticut, she lived surrounded by animals, art, and quiet companionship with women. Her home was a refuge from a world that never quite knew what to make of her, and didn't deserve to. A sharp-witted playwright and performer with an open heart but a closed past. Born in London but embraced by the American theater, McGrath was married briefly to George S. Kaufman, but later known for her strong emotional ties to women. Her wit sparkled in writing rooms and at parties, but her personal life was kept behind a velvet curtain. In later years, she lived with a longtime female partner in New York. Their relationship was never official, but it was real, and in its quiet way defiant. She made people laugh in screwball comedies while hiding in plain sight. In a rare moment of bravery, Kelly admitted in a 1960s interview that she was a lesbian. But the world didn't want to hear it. Offers dried up, and she returned to character roles, usually playing maids, neighbors, or comic relief. Despite Hollywood's resistance, Kelly never retracted her statement. She lived with women, loved women, and never apologized for it, even if the world responded with silence. By the 1970s, she was living on the edge of fame, but still holding fast to who she was. From the Crucible to Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, she played tortured women and lived as one too. A devout feminist and civil rights activist, Sherwood's fierce intelligence made her a magnet in theater circles. She was known for living in women-only communes during the 1970s and was openly associated with lesbian feminist groups, though she never publicly labeled herself. She once said, "Labels are for filing cabinets." Her truth was evident in how she lived, not what she said. In an age of silence, that alone was revolutionary. An Oscar nominee whose personal life stayed carefully out of the spotlight. Dunnock's roles often involved quiet suffering: the stoic mother in Death of a Salesman, the weary teacher in The Corn is Green. In real life, she was just as quiet, especially about her romantic life. There were strong rumors in the New York theater scene of long-term female companionships, but nothing ever confirmed. Still, those who knew her say she built a life filled with quiet love and deliberate choices. An Oscar nominee whose personal life stayed carefully out of the spotlight. Dunnock's roles often involved quiet suffering: the stoic mother in Death of a Salesman, the weary teacher in The Corn is Green. In real life, she was just as quiet, especially about her romantic life. There were strong rumors in the New York theater scene of long-term female companionships, but nothing ever confirmed. Still, those who knew her say she built a life filled with quiet love and deliberate choices. "I want to be alone," she famously said, and the world obliged. The reclusive Swedish-born legend had long retreated from the public eye by the 1970s, living quietly in New York City. What the cameras never captured was her complicated emotional world, shaped by lifelong relationships with women, especially Mercedes de Acosta, with whom she exchanged letters that brimmed with tenderness and heartbreak. Garbo never spoke of her sexuality, but her silence spoke volumes. She walked Central Park nearly every morning, often alone, wrapped in oversized coats and mystery. Her refusal to conform made her an icon, but her refusal to confess, born of fear, not shame, made her a symbol of so many queer women who had to live their truth in private. Steel-eyed and sharp-tongued, she was a legend, and a loner. One of Hollywood's strongest leading ladies, Stanwyck's on-screen toughness mirrored her guarded personal life. She married once, but never again. Her closest emotional relationships in later life were with women, including long periods of companionship with actress and confidant Nancy Slim Keith. Friends whispered, journalists speculated, but Barbara never flinched. To her, personal dignity meant silence. It was her armor and her prison. She spoke for demons, and may have battled her own. Best known as the voice of the demon in The Exorcist, McCambridge had a fierce career, but a deeply troubled life. Religious guilt, alcoholism, and unresolved identity struggles plagued her. There were whispers of romantic ties to women, but never confirmation. Her pain was evident in her memoirs, a life of brilliance, always shadowed by shame she didn't deserve. She played Miss Hathaway, the prim, loyal secretary who knew more than she let on. Nancy Culp was beloved for her deadpan wit on the Beverly Hillbillies, but off-screen, she was a fiercely private woman. Those close to her suspected she was a lesbian, and her manner and lifestyle reflected a quiet authenticity that defied the roles she played. In 1984, she ran for Congress in Pennsylvania and was outed during the campaign by her former TV co-star Buddy Ebsen, a moment that wounded her deeply. Though she never labeled herself publicly, in later interviews she gently nodded toward the truth, saying she never married and never wanted to. Her quiet dignity was a lesson in endurance. Say it, type it, share it. You never know who else might need to hear your words. A Broadway beauty with a golden voice and a private soul. Janice Page lit up stages and screens throughout the 1950s and 60s and remained active into the early 1970s. Though never married, she lived with a close female companion for many years in the Hollywood Hills. Never out, never confirmed, but often assumed. Page lived her life with a kind of grace that asked no questions and invited no gossip. For many women of her generation, that was the only peace they could hope for. A Broadway and film actress whose truth was more whispered than spoken. Best known for roles in Nashville and Norma Rae, Barbara Baxley often played bold women with strong convictions. Off-screen, she had a long, quiet domestic partnership with fellow actress Joan Hackett before Hackett's early death. Baxley never addressed her sexuality publicly, but those around her understood. Her home was filled with music, books, and photos of a life lived authentically, if silently. Independent, fierce, untouchable. But what did she never say? Yes, she was famously linked to Spencer Tracy, but some historians now argue that relationship may have been more of a cover than a romance. Throughout her life, Hepburn was surrounded by strong female companions, most notably Laura Harding, with whom she lived for years. She never discussed her sexuality publicly, and even in her autobiography, she preserved the mystique. But her boldness, her refusal to be owned by anyone, and her lifelong choice to live on her terms, those are the marks of a woman who made space for herself in a world that wanted to confine her. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Whether you stayed for a few seconds, watched all the way through, dropped a like, or left a kind comment, you made a difference, and I felt it.